back here, Crystal. Okay, so we have people. So we're live.
All right.
Right, we're a little bit early. It is the lunchtime AMA. Let me get one thing going here. Notepad, just in case anyone has any questions. Hey guys, today I had to go. I had to go to Canada, and I had to get into a fight with Justin Trudeau because they didn't want to lend this guy out to us. Right? Borders were closed. We couldn't get him. I went up there and I said, "Hey, you devastatingly good-looking prime minister. I need Scott Hammell for an hour." And he didn't look at this. He didn't want to mess with this. So here we are, Scott Hammell. Thank you for coming.
Good to see you, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Michael Sproul is here. Christoph Glass is here. Richie is here. Toby is here. Christopher Herrick from Liverpool is here.
All right. Yeah.
Christoph Glass from Germany. And Richie is here. So you come on CC a lot. You know, I'm using all these awesome connections I have. You've been on the panel. We've met you out at some events. You know, lately I've been just talking with people. I've talked to Danny Goldsmith. I've talked to Alexander Slemmer. Basically about their origin story. I'm looking at it. I'm obviously a comic book guy. I got all this stuff here. And you've got an awesome poster behind you here, and I'll want to know about that at some point. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, just trying to get through this bizarre time, and you know, different for everybody. And some days are great, some days are bad, some weeks are great, some weeks are bad, and yeah, just trying to get through, trying to keep the house together, the lights on, and my sanity as close to sane as sane as possible.
You know, everybody's got it different. Kids, no kids. I mean, everybody's going through their own unique experience, we'll say. And so we're trying to take a break from the outside world a little bit. Okay, Mike has got one right off the bat we can get into. Mike wants to know if you've used the coin slide yet.
You know what? I have, and it's funny because I'm writing a new show right now, and I'm trying to think, like I have a routine for that and was ready to go. I've been working on that routine since I got it. And now I'm trying to reshift my focus into magic and stuff that doesn't require any audience participation whatsoever. Because I think that what I do as a live performer is going to be one of the last phases to get like brought back in. And then assuming that that's the last phase, it's probably going to be another few months before people are willing to join me on stage and touch my props and lend me their ring. So I've been playing actually with the show concept for the last few years. I'm readjusting it right now, and I'm trying to decide if it's going to be a good look to use my own ring. And it's like, this ring I had made for one of my stunts on the anniversary of it. It's a one-of-a-kind ring, but will the audience believe that coming from a magician? I don't know. So yes, I have been playing with that, but given the current state of the world, I don't know that it's going to be used for the next little while. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, you know, I hope if people are coming out, we don't have to stay on it too long. I hope if people are coming out and they're comfortable enough with going to the magic show, that we're at the point where they'll take a ring, especially if everybody is being safe. You know what I mean? But
yeah, and there might be weird little workarounds that you can do in terms of like, you know, having a brand new pack of cards that the spectator opens, does something, picks a card, signs it, and then you take it. Who knows what the workarounds are going to be in the future? But you know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough, and we could probably talk more about plans like in the future, but I mean, let's go back. I do want to get the origin story of Scott Hammell because, you know, you're a particular beast, one that we don't see here at, you're a beast that we don't see here at CC all the time. You are full on, I don't know how to say, stunts, Houdini, effects, big event illusions. And so, you know, I'm very curious in how it got started for you in magic. Was it small? And you know, this quantum leap you've taken to where you're jumping out of out of planes doing card tricks while you're skydiving, which is not something a kid sees a magician do a rope trick when they're 3 and says, I'm going to jump out of an airplane and do card tricks. And, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, the origin story for me is that I started with juggling when I was 12 years old. And, being an idiot, I decided I was going to audition. We had a local international busker festival, which was like street performers. They come in, set up what they call a circle show. And literally thousands of people will form a circle and watch them. And they get performers from all over the world. Back in 97, when I was in grade 7, they had this fringe festival opening where it was basically an audition and the winner got one of those circle shows and got to like be officially on the bill. So I had been juggling for like 4 months and I was like, I'm going to audition because I didn't know any better. Obviously I didn't win, but it was at that audition that I met a man named Dan Truesdale, who became my mentor. And Dan was less of a mentor in the sense of like Aaron is a mentor to me, obviously, but like Aaron's more the kind of nuts and bolts sleight of hand. Dan is a performer who, he would bring me to his shows as a 12-year-old and teach me how to run a business and, how to interact with clients. And he was more of that kind of mentor to me as a young magician. But he quickly started showing me tricks. I was obsessive about it. Throughout high school, I started performing around the country and down into the States and the Caribbean, and started getting into like straitjacket escapes and stuff. And then throughout high school, I was really involved in student leadership. So I got the opportunity to go to these amazing leadership conferences and hear speakers. And one of my really influential teachers was like, hey, you should add a message to your magic. Like, some of these magicians and some of these speakers are doing that already, but like you'd really have like something interesting to talk about. So that's what gave me the idea for the first big stunt. Out of the hot air balloon, I did essentially it's referred to as a suspension straitjacket escape. So upside down straitjacket escape, but from a hot air balloon instead of buildings or cranes.
Hold on a second. I don't want to interrupt, but I'm going to. We've missed a quantum leap here. We've missed the close up. We've missed doing the close up shows, and we've gone to hot air balloon. I'm really trying to drill down into this like idea. Like the very first shows you started doing, was it all just like juggling and close up parlor stuff?
I would say it's the very, very early stuff was birthday parties, like when I was 12, 13 years old. But quite quickly, I started getting opportunities to perform at like local book fairs and car shows and stuff like that. So my material, I could always do close-up magic, like very basic tricks. But almost from the get-go, starting at the age of 13, I'd say the average audience was around 150 to 300 people. So the magic that I was doing was like more stage oriented. It wasn't, I did a few illusions in high school, like a metamorphosis and like a cutting in half illusion and stuff. But like for the most part, my material was, straitjacket escapes, rope magic, trying to think of what else I was doing in those days. But it was much more like stage style variety show. So I'd usually do like a juggling trick, a magic trick, and an escape. And that was my 30 to 45-minute show. So the amount of close-up magic that I did was relatively small. It was usually an upsell where I'd be doing like a big stage show, and then I would charge the client extra to go around and do some mingling close-up magic where it was just like, little like 1 or 2 tricks for this group, then 1 or 2 tricks for this group. So that's why I'm not really a very good sleight of hand magician, to be totally honest.
But like right away, you're like, this is what I want to do.
Totally. Oh,
this
absolutely.
Right
yeah, because like in high school especially, I would be working a 30-minute show that I just loved, making the same amount of money as my friends who were working at Burger King for like 40 hours, and they were just hating what they did. And it was like, okay, so I'm making about the same amount of money. Why don't I try to do this as a career? And luckily I have very supportive parents and supportive friends, and it just started working, and I never ended up going to university or college, and 20 years later, I'm still at it. So.
What was there anyone you saw at that time before you made this, transition? You got your chunks of time that you do that really inspired you to want to do this kind of thing, to step it up into this massive event style?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people that really inspired me. I for my 21st birthday, I mean, I guess that's a little bit later, but I went to Vegas with Dan, my mentor, and we saw Penn and Teller and Matt King, and just getting to see those guys at that level, I was like, whoa. On a smaller scale, we used to have a magic camp in Canada, and in a local setting, but still big international magicians would come up to camp, like Greg Fruin, who's got his own theater in Niagara Falls. He would literally, it's like a camp, but he would literally bring up tigers and do illusion shows at camp with tigers and stuff. And Murray Hatfield would come many years. Murray does this big international touring show every year. And like these guys, even though they were coming to camp, would still, they'd bring some of the heat. Like they weren't just like, oh, I'll have a deck of cards and I'll do a card trick that will hopefully play for 150 campers. It was like, no, they want to set the bar high. They're coming in full costume and setting the bar high with that stuff. So some of those guys were really influential to me in terms of seeing that level of performer. Dan Harlan, he was one of the early camp guys that wasn't just a close-up performer, but he did some linking ring routines and some more theatrical stuff at camp. And that really made me think like, oh, there's a market for this. The audience is really into this.
This magic camp I hear so much about. These guys that would come in, would they be like one-off performers or would they be like counselors that would hang out?
So kind of a couple different options. Usually when on the big years of camp, there would be camp counselors who were usually like part-time performers, or some of them were full-time guys. And like for me, I was a camp counselor for the first several years of my camp experience. And I was, 20 years old. So I would be given a cabin of like, 12, 13-year-olds. And I was a working pro, but I wasn't like a full-time instructor. And then they would have another set of guys that were instructors, and they would be people like Aaron, who would come in and he would teach a couple of card classes a day. He'd usually teach an elective class, and then they'd have him do lectures at night and shows at night. So, if you looked at the bulk of the work, while Aaron was teaching his master card class, I would have a break to go shower as the counselor, take a little break. And then when I was working with the kids, Aaron would get a break from having to instruct. And then in the later years, just as my skill set started to grow, I was able to go in as an instructor and not have to worry about having a full-time cabin. I could teach the juggling class. I could teach an escape class, a lock-picking class. And also at those times too, a lot of years, that's like getting into the busiest season for me. So there were years where I would go up to camp for 7-8 days, and every other day I was flying to Mississippi for a show. Then I'd come home, then I'd fly to Virginia for a show. Then I'd do like the University of Toronto, and like every other day I was sometimes out of the country a couple of different times, go back, and then I'd teach a class, drive to the airport, fly to a show, fly back that night, drive back up to camp. So it was hectic, but I mean, it was some of the best times of my life, for sure.
I'm starting to equate this camp with this Toronto, I think it was Toronto, this production of Godspell that's so famous that produced, Catherine O'Hara and Martin Short and, all these SETV and famous people that we have now. I'm trying to equate that kind of with CC because there's so many people from that camp experience that are now part of what we're doing. I just think that's a fun comparison.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, part of that is just, there's something about being up in the woods. One of the things that was best about camp, I think, was that all of the people that truly got it, so all the people that are still involved, like Lee Asher and, Jason Dean and Nate Cranzo and those guys who are camp guys, they were all the camp guys that got it in terms of checking their ego at the door and just being there for the kids and for the experience. like a lot of those guys, if they wanted to, you send any of those guys to, Magi Fest in Ohio or, excuse me, a lot of other conferences, and they're seen as like the card stars and the kind of celebrities of the Magic world. But at camp, everyone was just hanging out. And so that enabled these really tight friendships to form in a way that I don't think a lot of other magicians get it. So many magicians have these big egos, and it's so silly to me, but like they go in with these big egos and they don't get it. So they don't get the idea of being a part of something so amazing and so special and something that really does help the Magic community.
Now, yeah, because I met you at the same time. I kind of met almost Alex for the first time and Jason for the first time. And it was such a vibe of, the brother of my brother is my brother. Everyone was so nice and so welcoming, and I got along with everyone so well that, it was just pretty amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. For sure. It's a bummer that that's no longer going. And especially now, like it would have been interesting to see how CC would have merged with that camp world. And, you guys probably would have gotten a lot of campers signing up for CC. And I'm sure a lot of CC members would have been, invited to camp to kind of explore that whole world. And, back in those days, we talked about doing like an adult version of camp because as weird as this sounds, we had camp counselors in their 20s and 30s, and they wanted to pay to be a camper technically, but they were given their own cabin for obvious reasons, but they didn't want any of the responsibilities. They didn't want to teach classes, but they wanted to be around that immersive Magic experience for a full week. It's like taking CC and having a week-long thing where you're just away in the woods where internet connections weren't working. So it was just about the Magic and the hangouts. And so we talked about doing adult stuff, like an adult week, and, then camp kind of fizzled out and it just stopped all of a sudden. And yeah, so I don't know. It would have been interesting to see how it kind of weaved together for sure. So
maybe in the future, you never know.
Who knows? Yeah, definitely.
We just shut down all the camps here for the summer. So
yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
Still a weird time. So is that where you met Aaron at camp?
Yes. Yeah, I'm trying to think of, like, I would have met him his first year up there, because I think my first year was Lee Asher's first year, and I think it took another 2 or 3 years before Aaron came up. I might be wrong about that. I'll have to ask him. But yeah, the first year we were buddies, but not super close. And then there was one year where, and I think it was the year that I didn't have a cabin. So I was able, like my schedule just meshed with Aaron's perfectly, and we always ended up hanging out, and then we just became super close. And a few years later, we had the opportunity to work on a bullet catch documentary together, and that's when we became like real tight. And if I were to get married, Aaron would probably be the best man. I'd probably ask him to be my best man. Like we've become very close, over the years, and he's someone that I just love and respect so much. So.
Well, I'll try to get him to watch this to hear that. You probably won't though.
I tell him all the time.
Yeah, I know. That was very moving. It made me lose my train of thought about camp and Aaron for a second.
That's why I think what you guys are doing is so cool, because people like Chris coming in from the UK, I get to see once a year, and Mike, and all of these people. It's just like this. It's similar to camp. It really is. And, we've got this online world that we can stay connected to throughout the year and, message each other and inspire each other and kind of work together on stuff. And it's an interesting little offshoot. And I think CC would be very different if it weren't for camp kind of giving some of the blueprint away.
I did want to go back to one thing you said. You said Aaron was with you when you shot your bullet catch documentary.
Yeah.
Just give us a little coloring of that experience. I don't want to go in too much because there may or may not be something coming in the future about that on the network here. But just talk a little bit about that and the trip, really.
Yeah, that was pretty wild because the kind of genesis of that was having a conversation with this guy that I was doing some TV development with at the time. And we were sitting having lunch. He's from the other side of the country, so he was in town, and we were doing a bunch of pitches and stuff at some of the networks. And he's like, so what's a secret in magic that most magicians don't know? And I thought about it for a second, and I was like, you know what? I think probably one of the best guarded secrets in magic is Penn and Teller's bullet catch. And he's like, well, what is that? And I explained what the trick is. He's like, well, you've done all these stunts. Would you ever consider doing a bullet catch? And I was like, yeah, I mean, if someone else paid for it, yeah, I'd consider it. And I said that just thinking like, no one, especially in Canada with all of our very strict gun rules and stuff, no one's going to ever green light this. He's like, oh, interesting. Like, what if I could pitch a documentary where you learn the bullet catch and I shoot the gun? And I was like, well, what experience do you have with guns? He's like, none. And I was like, okay, so then it's less likely to even happen. So the next day he calls, he's like, hey, I've got a production company like that wants to do this project. And I was like, okay, well, that's one little part of it. Like, I've been part of production companies for years when nothing ever gets picked up. And then the next week was the Toronto International Film Festival. So like all of these industry people are there. This film production company pitches a network, and they bought it like right on the spot. Like, we were in this bar, they signed a napkin deal, and I was like, oh shit, like this is going to happen now. So first call I make is to Aaron, and I was like, hey, like, would you be interested in this? He's like, don't do the friggin' bullet catch. And then it was like, okay, like, would you consider setting me up with some of your friends that have experience? Jim Steinmeier, for instance. And he's like, yeah, I can probably come on board and like get you some connections. And then it just like snowballed, and then I got myself into some trouble, and like, you know, he's there to help. And then eventually I was like, hey man, I want to fly you up for a week and like, you know, really work with you on a week. And actually that's how I met Adam Grace as well. Because Adam knows a thing or two about guns, and I knew literally nothing. So the first time meeting Adam was over Skype, and he's showing me about how bullets work and how guns work. And he was in another country over Skype, literally holding up pistols and stuff. And I'm like shaking and my palms are sweating because I knew so little about it. And that's when it became really real for me. And, you know, Aaron's guidance on that whole project was just, you know, I cannot imagine doing that project without Aaron. So he's in the documentary. Like, we were shooting that project for a feature-length doc, and, you know, Aaron played a much bigger role than they kind of let on, but he's in the documentary throughout. So
and the documentary is available, kind of.
You know what? I don't know. I'm technically a producer on the film, but the production company has just totally left me out of all of the negotiations and stuff. It was on Vimeo for a while, and they took that off because they were negotiating a deal with Netflix. And then I think that deal fell through, and it just never got put back up. So to be honest, I don't know. And then the network that aired it ended up going bankrupt. So that's a whole other story, but it's
right.
No longer available through their channels, I don't think. I have no idea, to be honest.
When we find out, it's going to be a big deal. We'll do a big celebration. We'll do
maybe. Like, you know, I probably shouldn't say this on a live Facebook feed. I don't care at this point, but, you know, I think I know where we can get a copy of this, and I think we've talked about the idea of doing a viewing of the doc and, you know, talking about it. So maybe at a live event, because I don't know. I'm willing to do that, and I'll just say it's for educational purposes. So
okay, well, maybe we'll do that. You know, I would love to see it. I've heard about it for years. Heard a couple stories more than once, and that's one of them for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure some of the stories you heard didn't end up making it into the film, which would be interesting to, you know, to show it and talk about some of those stories that were changed or warped for the sake of the production.
Right on. We're gonna switch it up real quick because we have some stunts to talk about. But before that, Richie in the group has asked, what is your Desert Island magic book?
Oh, Desert Island magic book. I'd want something thick obviously, because I wouldn't know how long I was going to be there.
Well, you got to find a hatch.
I want to say right now it would be Mnemonica,
Okay.
Juan Tamariz, just because I'm slowly working my way through that, and I think that would give me a lifetime worth of stuff. The Al Baker book, that's just like a compilation of literally everything he's ever published.
Okay.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff in that book when you go digging for it. So it might be that as well. Either or. Probably Tamariz right now. But if you were to ask me, 3 months ago before I started working through Mnemonica, probably would have been the Al Baker book.
Cool. Well, I answered that one. I was very curious because you sent me a link of links of all your stunts and videos, and there's so many. Let's talk about record breaking for a minute. Like what?
It's an interesting distinction I will make, and this might light a fire under somebody who's watching who knows. I broke one record, but I set 3 records. It's a lot easier to set records than it is to break records.
So say it again then.
So I broke one record and I set 3 records. So I'm technically a 4-time Guinness World Record holder.
Yeah.
Only one of those records was something that I broke, and that record has since been broken. Like my record that I set, or the new record that I set of a guy whose record I broke, has since been broken. So I still call myself in my promotional material a 4-time Guinness World Record holder because at one time I had 4, but 3 of the records that I've got, I was the one who set them. And so they're stupid records that most people aren't ever going to try to break. But I mean, it still counts, but it's a lot easier to set a record because you get to kind of conceive it. Now, you'll often send Guinness your proposal and they'll change it or give you some criteria that changes what you had in mind. But yeah, does that make sense?
It does, but what, come on, don't play coy. What are they?
So the first record was the highest suspension straitjacket escape. So that's the one I mentioned before, hanging upside down from the hot air balloon. That was set in 2003 and hasn't been broken since. I don't know if anybody's tried. I plan on breaking my own record, but who knows? I posted the Ripley's clip on our group. Yeah, so that was aired internationally on an old program called Ripley's Believe It or Not that I've heard over the years they keep renewing the license to bring that show back, but I don't know. They keep on doing that and shelving it. The second record that I set was that's the one I broke, the longest inverted juggling duration. So I hung upside down and juggled for the longest amount of time. And that one, if you imagine throwing the juggling ball towards your foot and then gravity kind of pulls it back into your hands, if you're having trouble kind of visualizing what that might look like. The next one was for the fastest moving card trick. So I jumped out of an airplane and did a variation of a card stab, I guess, for lack of a better term. Volunteer comes in, picks a card. This is while we're free falling. Picks a card, shows the camera, puts it back in the deck, grabs the deck from my hand, flies below me, and then lets go. Cards go everywhere. I reach out and grab the selected card. And that one I kind of set by accident. I was in LA and actually with Aaron during that time in LA trying to do another stunt, but the drop zone wouldn't let me do it. And that was for my next record, which was a skydiving stunt. My plan in LA was to just jump out of a plane handcuffed to my waist. They wouldn't let me do that. Did the card trick instead. Got back to Canada, found another drop zone who was willing to let me do the handcuff stunt, but then they let me do it with a blindfold as well. So technically the record is the highest blindfolded skydive. And for that, I wore a black bag over my head and I was handcuffed to my waist, jumped out of the plane, opened up the cuffs during free fall, opened up my chute, and then landed the parachute blindfolded. So that was the 4th and final record so far.
So do you have to submit these to the World Guinness and say, is this a record that I can set?
Yeah, that's usually the best way to do it. I did not do that with the card trick. I think it was the card trick where I sent them a proposal and the video in one, and they accepted it. They accepted it there and then. But the other ones, because sometimes they have rules, or they'll have rules about like who needs to witness it to make it official.
Right.
So they want to know what equipment you're using to gauge your altitude. So because it's a numbers thing, for instance, the highest blindfolded skydive, well, we needed to know what altitude I was jumping at and how that altitude is being confirmed with altimeters, both digital and analog, and the equipment in the airplane, the experience of the pilot who has to sign a thing for it. So it can get kind of strict with the numbers, and they just want to know, okay, are you setting this record just willy-nilly, or how is this going to be officially documented? So, and for some of the records too, you have to have the camera going before you take off so that they know there aren't camera tricks happening. So right. They'll sometimes send you really weird rules about that stuff too.
Do you get annoyed or frustrated when you hear that someone has broken your record?
The second record that I broke, I was shooting a documentary, and that day earlier before I was shooting, I was at a bookstore flipping through the Guinness book, and the director, just as he was setting up his equipment, he's like, oh, what'd you get up to earlier? And I was like, oh, I was at a bookstore. He's like, find anything interesting? And I told him about I was flipping through the Guinness book. He's like, well, is there anything in there that you think you could break? And I was like, there's one that I think I have everything to do it. He's like, well, we should try to break that record right now and put it in the dock. And I was like, oh, okay. And then we just shot it over an afternoon, and I ended up breaking the record that day for the documentary. And so when that record was broken, I wasn't very upset, because it's like, I didn't really spend very much time training on that record. I kind of did it on a whim and, just got lucky. So if I spend, like the skydiving blindfolded handcuff, that stunt took me a couple of years of training, and I think I spent like $35,000 on all of the training equipment, preparation, production. And so to have that record broken would be a little bit more of like damn it. But some of the records I don't really care that much. So
you know what I care about? I care about the record for the biggest beard, which you had in that video explaining that at the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's massive.
It's funny because I was on tour in Southeast Asia for like, I was doing Australia, Southeast Asia for like 3 or 4 months. And the first week I plugged my clippers into the wall to trim my beard, and I broke, like the voltage was off. So,
that's how that happened? You decided to grow it?
Yeah, I fried the electrical components on the razor, so I couldn't trim my beard that whole tour. And I was like, I'm just going to leave it. And then when I got back, I was like, that's when I had, scheduled this production company to film all these videos and stuff. So yeah, had that big bushy beard for a while.
The question from the group is, and I think you might have said something, are you planning on or do you have a list of any ones that you're going to try to do in the future?
Record-wise,
yeah.
Like I said, I'd like to break my suspension straitjacket escape record. The plan was to go up to 10,000 feet, and we were flying the balloon into a storm, so we could only get up to 7,200 feet. But I also feel like I've been approached by a bunch of magicians over the years being like, kind of asking me prodding questions about that stunt. And it makes me think that someone's going to do it. And now that I'm a skydiver, my plan would be to go up to a ridiculous altitude, do the stunt, and then skydive to the ground. So that's kind of, and I've got a bit of a twist on something. So that's a record. There's an underwater straitjacket escape record that I want to break. And I might train for that this summer. I don't know but we'll see. And then other than that,
The answer is yeah. You want to try some? You're
sure.
definitely...
Yeah. I mean, it can get really good press, and you know, it can get you good press, and it also looks good in your bio. And I find that like when doing stage shows and stuff, especially a big market for me is high school and college students. And so, you know, if they're kind of reluctant to watch your show and then the introduction, it's like, oh, he's a 4-time Guinness World Record holder. That will kind of get their attention for an extra like 30 seconds of buy-in that I don't have to work as hard. It's not like I've got to come out and, you know, really work to get their attention and keep it. It's something that I can, you know, can be said in my intro, and then it just gives me a little bit of breathing room to not go out and be as forceful of trying to get their attention. Does that make sense?
It does. It does get, and you know, it's like Jerry Seinfeld or Chris Rock say, you know, you have that buys you 2 minutes.
Yeah, you still got to do a great show.
Yeah, like because you know you get the applause because you're Jerry Seinfeld, but then you still have to make them laugh. If you didn't make them laugh, then it's no good.
Absolutely. But, you know, these days, especially with that age demographic, they make up their mind really quick about whether or not they want to buy in or not. And, you know, I've played around with leaving that out and just trying to, you know, do a show. And it's like, I worked really hard on some of those records, so I might as well get a little bit of leverage out of them. And, you know, if you put it on a poster and it sells an extra 15% of the tickets, then great. You know, I might as well do that.
Right. No. And you don't always do these things just to break records. I saw one that was really clever, and you know, you sent me this link, and there's so many videos. I tried to watch as many as I could. I'm going to watch more, and I'll post more in the group, and I'll put it with the video so everyone can see. But you made the people of, was it Toronto, maybe?
Oh, the public vanish. Yeah.
The public vanish. You made people make you disappear with food.
Right. So
And
that one, yeah.
I love that.
And you know what? The most disappointing thing about that network going bankrupt for the bullet catch, we had like 2 really cool, socially conscious magic stunts that we were ready to go. The network went bankrupt. They were going to put $50,000 into it. That triggered the Canadian Arts Council to pull their funding, which caused another media fund to pull their funding. So we had like hundreds of thousands of dollars to do these next big stunts. And when the network went bust, it was literally, we were about a week and a half away from doing these stunts, and the whole thing was pulled out. So I was hoping to do one of these big socially conscious stunts every couple of years, had like 3 to 5 years planned, and lost it all. But that stunt that you were talking about, I lived in a glass box about the size of a bus shelter for 5 days and 4 nights and challenged the city of Toronto to make me disappear by bringing canned food donations that piled so high around the box that I vanished. And then we donated all of the food to the local food bank. Because we did that stunt in 2011. So it was like right after a financial collapse. So donations were down and demand for donations was up, which caused a big gap in the amount of food that they had at the food bank. So it's like, you know, what can I do? Did that stunt, and yeah, we raised like 18,000 pounds of food, if I remember correct. Got a ton of media coverage, and yeah, it was a really, really interesting stunt.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think that kind of stunt would be too hard to pull off today without the backing of a network. I mean, I don't know, you know, with social media and everything, if that's possible. Again, I don't really know what goes into it.
Yeah, that one we needed, just even though it was a stunt for a charity, renting the space, we did it in front of the busiest train station in the country. It's like right at the base of Canada's financial district, so most foot traffic and stuff. Just renting the space to put our box and have our crew there. Renting that space, I think, cost us $15,000. And that was after like some heavy negotiations, pulling strings and getting the mayor involved to be like, hey, this is cool. Let's support this guy. And so the next one, the space alone was going to cost us 25 grand, and it was going to be a buried alive stunt underwater. So the water tank was going to cost us, I think, $40,000. So like just building the stuff and doing it, not to mention hiring a publicist and everything, like those are the costs that it's like, yeah, I think social media would expand this and get some attention, but it's coming, like I don't have an extra $40,000 right now to build a tank that I'm going to use once, and then, you know, that's it. So
Likely story. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. So you know, then you try to get a corporate sponsor who, you know, this was for raising awareness and money for water campaigns to give people around the world access to clean drinking water. So, you know, there's a Canadian bank that like water is their thing. And so, you know, trying to just get your foot in the door to do that is interesting. But I might actually do the cheaper version myself and do an online version of it over the course of a couple days. That one's going to absolutely suck. I don't want to explain what the stunt is,
Okay.
but it would really push me physically, and very much, it would be a very uncomfortable stunt for me mentally to do. And I'd be repeating it every 15 minutes for probably 2 days straight. So
We would be excited to watch, but it would suck for you is what you're saying.
yeah, for sure. And you know, that stuff you prep as much as you can, and then in the moment you just get through it, and then after you try to book a vacation. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, good. I want to watch that one. The other video, and you'll have to explain to me how they go together. You're juggling explosives,
Yeah.
but then I think it leads into this is how my hand healed when the juggling explosives went wrong.
Yeah. The first time I tried it. Sorry, go on.
No, I mean, the hand looked disgusting. I just want to hear about it.
It's pretty graphic. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a big mistake. Yeah. So I was trying to juggle live explosives, which were like Roman candle fireworks, and you know, tried to be as safe as possible. And I wanted to shoot it in a real guerrilla style way. So went to a park in the middle of downtown Toronto in the middle of the night. Friends are kind of spread out around this field, rolling, light up the Roman candles. And as I'm juggling, I was wearing gloves at the time. One of the fireballs shot out of the Roman candle, basically point blank, and hit the glove that I was wearing, instantly melt. I didn't realize the glove that I was wearing contained a synthetic material. So the fireball essentially melted a hole in the glove. The fireball traveled inside and then got stuck between my palm and the leather piece of the glove, where it just burned and burned until it went out. Melted the glove to my palm, and so when I ripped off the glove, my palm basically went with it. And so that was awful. And actually, Mark Correa was there right next to me filming. He had a GoPro camera on his helmet, and when I dropped the Roman candles, because that happened, I couldn't control where or how they landed, and one of the fireballs shot like right past Mark's face. It missed his face by like centimeters. I don't know if that video is posted. I talk about it in my speeches a lot, but I'll send you a link if it's not public. But so then a year later, I decided to try that stunt again and had these full like fireproof asbestos suits. So it looked very kind of spacey, and I performed it on a beach. So it was like the sand and stuff. It had a really cool aesthetic to it. And I love that. That's probably, of the videos that I've done, one of my favorites. Just, I paid a lot of music to have my friends produce original music for it. And we got like high-speed cameras and, you know, really.
I don't want anyone to worry. Mark Correa's face is fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good-looking gentleman. That's all.
Oh, man. And like, based on how good-looking he is now, like thinking, because that happened in like 2012 or I think it was 2012. Like, you know, he was a lot younger then and didn't, you know, he's always handsome, but like not as handsome as he is now. And like thinking like, if I had maimed his face and ended his career, it would have been brutal.
He could have sued you for future damages.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but thank God that didn't happen.
Yeah, right. And yeah, not worried about your hand or there's no skin on it, but as long as Mark's face is okay.
And actually, funny enough, I think it's in the video. I think his part makes it in the video. There's a couple variations online of the skydiving blindfolded handcuff jump. Mark came to watch that stunt. A couple days ago is the 10-year anniversary of that stunt. Like, Mark's been a good friend of mine for years, but I keep forgetting that like 10 years ago, Mark was like a young teenager. So you get to see like little baby Mark in that video. At the end of the stunt, he's, I think, in the background, and give him a hug or something. But like, he was just getting into performing stunts and stuff at that point. And I was like, hey man, I'm doing this stunt. Like, you should come out and watch for the day. So his dad drove him in, and like, they were just at the drop zone all day, just hanging out and watching. And looking back at that video now, it's like little mini Mark. And now he's like, 6'2" or whatever he is.
He's another guy I met this year, and he was just blown away by his performances, by his sense of humor.
Totally.
Yeah, just all around great guy.
One of the most talented, amazing people I've ever met ever in my life. Another camp guy that like, I've known Mark since like he was going to camp. I think he started going at the age of 7 or 8. And yeah, just the best dude. So proud of what he's doing.
And hopefully I'll have him on soon.
Oh, he'll be fantastic.
Yeah. So
his schedule's wide open these days.
He's got a daily podcast people should check out. He's in the Facebook group. You guys should look him up.
Yeah, I think it's called Quarantine Live.
Quarantine Live, and in the Facebook group he's Mark Tricks. Because he does magic tricks. I don't know. Okay, so the last thing of the videos that you sent me, the last thing I saw is a while ago there was this YouTube video where this guy took a picture of his face every day for 20 years.
Right.
Right, and I don't know if that was inspiration for what I'm about to talk about or not. And you just saw him one picture of his face every day for 20 years, and he, put them all together. And it's to this beautiful piano music, and all the backgrounds change. His hair changes every day. You did the same thing except with juggling. You juggled 1.5 seconds a day. For how long?
I did it every day for a year. I think in those videos, those are like, nobody really watched those, and you watch one and you get it. There's some funny and some interesting stuff in some of them, but I think I do talk about, there were 2 or 3 main inspirations for me doing that. But basically I put a GoPro camera on my chest, got like this chest harness, filming outwards, and I would juggle in front of it and then sync up the pattern, so it's like 1.5 seconds every day. Aaron's in a bunch of them actually, because he was living in Toronto at that point, I think.
Okay.
But anyways, it was like 1.5 years of like, I'd be flying out to shows and they'd let me film it in the cockpit. Trying to remember some of the other things, like a snowstorm, probably.
I mean, I kind of want to do it as a project. Have you ever taken them all and put them all together and sped it up?
I meant to do that for a year, and I just never got around to doing that. But that could be a great quarantine thing of like revisiting that and chopping it down. Because I think if you were to watch the whole year, I think each video is a couple minutes long. So it'd be nice to like speed it up and make it like 1 minute or 2 minutes or something.
The only issue I see is like, to actually do it, you would have to time them again.
Probably.
And that would be the annoying part.
I might be able to upload them and like just kind of mesh the first and the last clips together and then speed it up. I'll play with that. But yeah, and that's one of those things that like in the planning stages, it seems like a very good idea at the time. It's like, oh, this will be cool. I'll have this like year-long diary. And then by the 3rd month, you're like so over it. But at the end, you've got something cool. Like, I mean, you've been doing the Who guitar songs and stuff, and like.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask about it because I decided to do it during quarantine. I did a little bit of a song a day on Instagram, and I got really back into playing guitar because I had to learn a little bit a day, and I've already talked about this here a bunch. And while it was going on, it was my birthday, and I was able to get a new guitar, and I got really into guitar playing. And then it was Pete Townshend's birthday, so I stopped because I figured, okay, enough's enough. No one's like saying, where's my Who videos? I mean, I get plenty of likes, but no one's like saying, where's the next one? So I decided to stop on his birthday, good stopping point. I put it down. I haven't played a guitar. I haven't touched it, a day since I started. The inspiration for the guitar has gone away. But it was like a self-made goal I set for myself to do it every day.
Totally.
And so when you set that goal, you want to keep to it. So I found a proper stopping point and I stopped. But like you set a goal to do it for a year.
Yeah.
And so by the end of it, by 3 months, you were done, right?
Yeah, and I mean, there were some days where like I would have, a small tour booked or a trip booked or something where I was like, oh, I know every day I'm going to have something cool here. But then there were other days where it's like, sometimes it's a week or two between shows or between things. And you just really start thinking like, okay, well, what's today's video? And then other days where I would just have the camera, I'd set it up, film it, do it. And then at the end of the month, and some days I'd do like 3 or 4 videos, and then I would realize that the camera was actually pointed down. So I couldn't use that cool clip. It was a much more interesting backdrop, but the camera was messed up, or like the camera setting changed and it would take a picture. So, the interesting thing is it gets you thinking every day about, okay, well, what's today's video going to be? What's the background going to be? Am I going to do it in front of, a Carter poster? Or like, if I'm at an art gallery, is there going to be something cool there? Or like, a friend who I haven't seen and I'm just going to get them waving or something like that. Or like, there were videos where I know like I could do something funny over 3 days where it was like setting it up. And actually in March, Mark Correa was in the background of one of the videos, and every day in the corner I have the date. And on his, if you look very carefully, it's like an Easter egg. Instead of saying MAR 7, it said Mark 7. So like little things like that I'd like think to put in, and it just gets you thinking in a little bit of a different way, and forces you to do something creative, even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah, and especially if you make that thing, like only a couple times I did this where I would do a couple songs once and then post them over a couple days. I felt that was too much cheating sometimes.
Totally.
I would do one a day. But yeah, that's very interesting. And, I'm trying to think about what the next thing might be. But, I know the Who songs. That's what I did. Looks like we have a question from Jeff, who I think you've met before. Scott, have you had opportunities to have a residency at a hotel or a cruise ship tour? Or are your gigs generally one-offs or a short series of shows?
Generally sporadic. It's funny that you asked that. Right in high school, I knew that I wanted to get into speaking and did that balloon stunt to kind of get into speaking, but thought like, oh, the shows are going to come in right away. I've just, been on Ripley's. I set this world record. I'm young. I'm super ambitious. So sent out all my promo stuff and was like, all right, world, I'm ready. And then the phone just didn't ring for like 6 months. And I was like, oh, shoot. So kind of started changing the plans. I spent, I don't know, like 10 grand building a new show, a cruise ship act, filming a video and sending that out to every cruise ship director that I could find. And then that started taking a few months. And as soon as the phone started ringing for cruise ships, that's when my speaking career started taking off. So, and I was like, okay, well, do I want to be like, especially some of the early cruises that I was offered were like really bad cruise ships. And it's like, okay, you're doing 2 stage shows a day, 2 close-up shows a day. You're calling bingo numbers over lunch, and we want you to organize the kids' games in the afternoon. And I know that those gigs, all my friends were like, if they're telling you that's what it is, you're going to get on the ship. They're going to be like, oh, our entertainment director didn't show up. You've got to do all these extra gigs. And so I didn't have, it's not like the glamorous cruise gigs that some of these performers have now. It would have been really slogging it. So I decided instead of doing that, I got more into the speaking. Had a hotel that I was working on a deal with right before COVID hit, and then, that dried up. So, we'll see if that ever comes back. But no, aside from that, there have been like, not residencies, but like every year I'll get booked to do the same leadership conference. And I've been doing that several years running, going back 10 or 12 years. So things like that would be probably the closest that I have to it. But I've never done a cruise ship, never done a residency gig more than like, 2 weeks, I think. I performed at Casa Loma in Toronto for 2 weeks over March break for like March break programming. That would be the closest to it. That was like 7 shows a day, I think, for 2 weeks.
What do you get different out of a speaking engagement than you do pure like entertainment, big event magic show?
Yeah, the speaking is nice because a lot of my magic is very storytelling based, and they tend to be very personal stories. So it just enables me to kind of take a little bit more breathing room than you would normally in an actual show, and can give the content a little bit more meat, so to speak, and, really make it, instead of just trying to entertain your audience, you give them something to think about that will hopefully, they'll take with them for a while. And I think all good artists do that in general, but with the speaking, it's a little bit more purposeful. And I find, because that's my biggest market, I get most of my income and bookings that are speeches, that magic is kind of the vehicle to deliver the message, so to speak. A lot of the material that I work on, it's with a message in mind. So I'll think about like, okay, well, what message am I trying to portray to the audience? And what's a solid piece of magic that helps illustrate that point without trying to beat it over the head? Because sometimes it's just fun to have a piece of magic to break it up or whatever. So yeah, I like the idea of really leaving them with a message. And I try to even do that if I'm booked to do just like a 30-minute theater show, for instance, on a bill. My magic tends to have something that I like to try to put forward artistically, something that I want to say. It's not just like trick, trick, trick. It's like, here's what I believe. This is an artistic representation of that belief system. So.
Nice.
Does that make sense? I'm talking a lot.
I mean, it does make sense. No, that's why we're here. And, I like to hear it, especially, people have so much time now to think about these things.
Totally. You've
had a pretty rough week. So
yep.
Thank you for coming on. You're in the hospital a little bit, and I don't want to dwell on it too much. But you're up and around, and
not COVID related. I wasn't.
Not COVID related.
Wasn't related to COVID.
No, wasn't related to COVID. But my question is, in this time of lockdown, in this time of COVID, like, how are you coping, say, or not coping with what's going on and what the future might bring now that things are starting to open up a little bit, whether that's good or not? I mean, it's a tough one. I know it's a tough one to leave on, but that's
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm joining you from my studio, so I got a high-speed internet connection in here so that I could do live virtual shows, and just like really spread out and kind of rig up. Like, I've got lighting set up, and I can, change the colors of it and full control over that stuff and everything. I'm trying to avoid the desire to like go full bore into a new business model, because I think many times throughout my long career so far, I've seen these little kind of changes, and people wrap themselves up so much in like, oh, I'm going to be the first, or I'm going to do it this way. And as you guys know with CC, some of this stuff takes years to build. And I think in the years that things are going to be a little bit different, I can really hone in and focus and make my shows better and adapt them in small ways. Like, I think that live shows are still going to be a thing. It's one of the oldest things humanity has, is storytelling and entertainment. So I don't think that's ever going to go away. Now, do I want to spend my time developing shows that don't require any audience participation or audience members touching my props? Yeah, but I'm doing that more instead of developing like an online show. I've had to cater my shows and, do variations of tricks and change things up and stuff. But like, it's hard to do a straitjacket escape. I have to wait until my girlfriend can come and lock me up before I can do a straitjacket escape in a show. So I'm trying to not like beat myself up to create, an online magic course that I can offer kids, or, something like that just doesn't grab me as much. It's like, okay, I'm going to take some time. I'm going to reboot. I'm going to try to learn some new skills, learn some new tricks, write some new stories, and focus it that way. I don't know if that's the right approach. And again, like we talked about before, I think that live shows are going to be one of the last things that gets phased in. But I do think that that's where my heart is, and I don't want to do something half-assed that makes me want to just pack it up and call it quits.
That seems like the best anyone can do, right? I mean,
well, and the other thing is, like, no one knows. It's like, okay, well, no one knows what the future is going to be. So why devote, like, 6 months developing something that might all of a sudden end, and then you're like, oh, shoot, I wish I had done this. No one knows. So it's like, just follow your heart. Do what your heart's telling you. Right now it's saying develop new stuff, so when this is all over, you can adapt to it that way.
Yeah, man. I mean, thanks for coming on here. This has been great.
Anytime.
You have stories to spare. I know you have more, so I know you'll be back. If anyone hasn't seen anyone's new watching, there's a back room. There's two lectures you've given us, 52 little extras. I forgot what the other one is. Greg, thank you so much for coming on here. Everybody's saying thank you.
Anytime. Thanks for joining us. I know you guys can literally be doing anything on the internet.
Yeah, right.
You're here with us.
All right, Scott. Thank you so much, sir. I'll talk to you soon.
Love you, buddy. Be safe.